Hi, everyone. I was going to sneak in and do a little bit of a video. There's been so much controversy around Beyonce's Renaissance album, and I wanted to address something because it's been on my heart, and I was thinking about it all night. And I wanted to talk about Church Girls because that was my favorite song, and I see that people are upset with the song. I also see that people instantly started trending um Jay-Z because people thought that she was talking about Jay-Z. And I want to put my 2 cents in there and put this to bed. And I was like, I absolutely feel like um I feel like um that this needs to be dissected a little bit more. Okay, so people are upset at church girls because they feel as if she is not coming from a church girl perspective in order to be able to uh, write this kind of song. And I just am annoyed by that because I feel as if she is that even though she may not have been raised in the church in the same way that Michelle and others, and I do appreciate Kev on stage, um, and that chick Angel made a video and they were making a comment about how this song was really an ode to Michelle Williams. And thinking back, it makes a lot of sense. Michelle Williams has if you look at how she dances, it's extremely awkward. And I've always kind of commented on how kind of awkward it is. And a lot of that awkwardness deals with the fact that she was much more raised in a conservative church. And she has done these church albums after she left Destiny's Child. And it's just, I personally, I have her albums, but I struggle with having a whole album of Michelle Williams' voice. But I do like some of the songs that her and Beyonce and Kelly have been on her album. And I feel like that is a very good idea. But there's a couple of things that I want to talk about that, and we can start with Michelle first, and just kind of how this all represents just women in general. So, as a woman who was raised in Church of God in Christ, I must say that as a kid, I never understood this level of restriction. They really wanted to separate what a woman does. They train these girls into these roles, and what does a woman do? Like, a woman's never allowed in the pulpit. A woman can never walk in front of a pulpit. She has to be on the bottom. Like, she's not supposed to be so level. She can never take certain titles. The notion of having a female pastor was like never, because the man is always the shepherd. The how you have you're never supposed to go around with sleeveless stuff. Heaven forbid you wear pants. You can never wear pants in church. I mean, that was horrible. But even pants outside of church, a lot of women didn't do that either. The I've had even sermons being preached about me wearing stockings at 10, right? And so it's like she should still be in ruffles. It's like ruffles at 10. I can't imagine. I have a 10-year-old. The notion of putting ruffles on my 10-year-old, she laughed me out the room. Um, the the idea of wearing heels. And so, how when do you have a heel and make sure the chunkiness of the heel. I started wearing heels when I was in junior high. But and then one thing that sometimes men don't understand is that, especially when I was growing up, there were tights and ruffles stop at a certain size. So even if you think that I should have worn stockings, no, yeah, tights and ruffles, it's like, where am I going to find ruffles that fits a 10-year-old? Like, and I was wearing a size 0 in the 10, in the little teen section at 10, 11 years old. And then was wearing like a size 2. So when you get to like the teen section, there's no ruffles, there's no tights, it's stockings. This is what we do. And so, but they don't know anything. But you'd have the church mothers who's like so concerned about how short your dress is. How many slips are you having? So like if your dress came with a slip, you still need another slip, even if it's hot. It's just all of these rules, and heaven forbid that you absolutely wore no stockings at all. My cousin did that once, and that became such a taboo issue, my older cousin. And this is the kicker, because I started shaving my legs in junior high. I mean, I literally begged my mother, like, I'm shaving. And one of my really good friends, her mother was cool with her shaving, and she shaved like every day, and she had like the smoothest legs. And I was just like, I want smooth legs. It was such a taboo thing. And to have shaved legs, and oh my God. So I say all that to say that when I understand now that I'm older why they did this. And a lot of the rules, and because people would talk about how the rules, and don't even get into makeup wearing. And by the time I was in high school, I was wearing foundation. And the reason why I was wearing foundation is because I just got my glasses off. And so I had all these major two-tone things that's happening if you wear glasses all the time. Then these two-tone, and you'd have this like horrible thing. And so I was constantly wearing I was wearing Lancome to try to even my skin on. I was trying to do all of these different things. And there was this really great pressed powder that Sears had at the time. I mean, granted, there's no more Sears, but it was fantastic. And it matched my skin tone. Like you could barely tell that I had anything on. It was beautiful. And people would still comment like, she's too young to be wearing makeup. First of all, the fact that she's wearing makeup, because adults don't wear makeup. And my mom does hardly ever wore makeup when I was growing up. My grandmother was the one who wore lipstick to the day she died. Red orange. I chuckle thinking about it, because it's like red orange. I would never get away with red orange. But anyway, so my thing was, and then, the kind of bra, my grandmother was all into like this pointy bra. And I was like, I'm not wearing pointy bras. Like, what are we doing? This is like, no, I want a round bra. Like, I mean, it's just all of these things. Like, why are you so concerned? And so people would begin to have this conversation of like, why are you so concerned with all these different rules and everything? And I, as an older woman, I'm not that old, I'm still in my 30s. I understand looking back, because I am 4th generation removed from a plantation, right? And so the people that I grew up in the church with, like one of the oldest members, she's 100. She just died, 101, I think. She just died this year. And, her mom, I mean, some of these people most of them came from the South or the Midwest. A lot of them lived in a space where their parents or them were born in a plantation. Their parents were born as owned people. And so you have to think that the church was their only outlet. And their main concern was this, like, how do we protect our young girls from possibly being raped, molested? On top of that, and if they are raped or molested, it also is protecting your sons, your boys, because the boys are going and the men are going to be wanting to do something because they're hurt, they're whatever. And if they act out, then it's possibility of being lynched, being jailed, being, killed. All of these things were instilled to try to protect the family. So I get it now that I'm older and I've read a ton of things and I've researched a lot of things. But as a young adult growing up in this, it was difficult. And I still struggle with my level of sexuality even to this day. Like, it was difficult for me because how am I supposed to attract a guy? Not saying that I'm supposed to, but like, I like a guy. So how am I supposed to go about this? Like, what am I supposed to do? I don't want to go to hell. And then eventually we get married and then all of a sudden sex is okay. Like, how does this work? And so it was all of these layers that really made it very difficult for me to process. And I understand this church girl song because this church girl song is really kind of hitting to the meat of this oppression that you have on what it means to be a good Christian also has some scars because we're not having these healthy conversations about sex and sexuality. And so it leads us to try to figure this out. And I do want to go party. I joined it, AKA, right? So even when I did go party, I didn't go crazy. Like, I'm not saying I should, but I didn't, do as much as I think I probably would have done if I didn't have this mindset of this level of restriction. I'm not saying that I should have gone crazy or should have done, a lot of different things. But it also leads me to another conversation part because the part that people kept talking about Jay-Z is this comment about, like, even when I got a tattoo, I did a tattoo as like my rebellion, and I was like, I'm well into my 20s, and it was at this moment where I was like, I don't care. And when my mother saw my tattoo, it's on the back of it's on my lower back. When they saw my tattoo, I was like, look, I don't care. He has a tattoo. And my tattoo says the art of war. And I like my tattoo. It needs a touch up, but I'm not sure if I care. So that's why I haven't touched it. But there is a part here though where it says so get your racks up, get your math up. I'ma back it up. And it says, but mm, I'm trying to figure out because it's a line here that says your face. Okay, where is this line? It says that your face is. I just said it right next to the math. Because your face is. Oh, okay. And so it says, I'm gonna back it up. No. And so it says, so get your racks up, get your math up. I'm gonna back it up, back it up, back it up. I'm gonna bust it, bust it, bust it, bust it, acting up. I see them gray sweats. I see a blank check. Must be the cash because it ain't your face. It must be the cash because it ain't your face. Now here's the thing. When you're in the church, there are some attractive young boys, right? And then there are some attractive, unattractive young boys. And the attractive young man tends to be one of few things: promiscuous, possibly children already, and yet they're still in the church, saved and sanctified. Um, and or they meet up with a young girl who looks like she does not come to the church, and that's their preference, right? And so the question becomes that if I'm trying to remain chaste and following the rules and being a good Christian girl, then why aren't the young men following the same kind of path and try to be with me? Right. And so the I will never forget. Okay, so I'll never forget. I'm gonna give an example. I'm gonna tell because I really don't mind telling this part because it's he will definitely not watch this video. There was a young man, I think I met him at 14, and I the only reason why he got my number is because he asked my number from a friend. And we go to they'll have like district meetings, and he asked from one of my friend district meetings, and so she'd call him, and then we'd be on three-way, and we'd call each other, and we talk, and he hardly ever spoke. So I hardly ever heard his voice. I can't really remember his voice. And if you show me in front of a crowd, I would not be able to pick him out. Um, because so for a few years, like he would call ever so often whenever I see him out at church, at a district meeting, he'd barely speak. I was like, what is this? And he was not somebody I was attracted to at all. And I'm not going to say that to somebody. Like, that's just rude. Unless you're rude to me, then I may say something rude like that, but I'm not going to be. But he was never rude. He just didn't hardly ever spoke. And so I was like, I like, there's no, you have to have a personality if you're not that attractive. Anywho, so him and so eventually, uh, by the time I was either in college, my sophomore year in college, and my mother still had my house phone on because I had my own phone in my own room, with her own phone number. So one day I pick and I leave messages. I had a message machine and everything. And so I come back to school maybe like on a weekly or a bi-weekly basis, come back home. And so I answered the phone one day, and this guy called, and I hadn't talked to him in like a year, no, maybe about 2, 3 years. He didn't really say much. And he was older than me, so that makes it even worse, right? So he called me up to explain. Now get this. Home dude living with someone with a kid, talking about he was waiting on me, but he couldn't wait forever. And I was like, you're waiting on me to do what? What exactly were you waiting on? And I give this example because by the time that as soon as I graduated from high school, I graduated at 16. The mother of my church was like, when are you getting married? And I was like, I'm going to college. So then I graduated from college at 20. They're like, okay, now we're getting married. And I was just like, no, no. I still need, I'm going to grad school. I need a career. And so it's one of those things that in the church, they begin to start hooking you up with whoever's available, right? And so, of course, the good looking guys are off into their own little space and ignoring you. And so you're left with these slim pickings. And so that is what she's referring to in this in this space, because what we don't need, and that's the key point. We don't need to be with you. Like, you don't need to set us up. These are not our only options. Yes, we would love a man to be in the church, God fearing, lovely young man who wants to go to church all the time, who's, um, who was raised in this very Christian conservative mindset. However, that's just not realistic. And then you become an adult. And then this is the kicker. When you become an adult and you begin to reflect on what all these other people were doing and all these adults were doing, and you were just minding your business being a kid, they were lying to me. Like, home dude's cheating on such and such. She's cheating on her husband. They don't like each other. They were set up. They did. You're like, there was this one lady, she looked at me. She's married with a couple of kids. I don't particularly care for her kids, but I actually liked her. I didn't like the rest of them. Anyway, she came up to me one day, which is random. She's just like, look, don't make a decision like I did. You gonna finish school. And that's my regret. And I'm like, well, life's not over, me being a kid. Life's not over. And I actually bought her a book because she really wanted this book, and I bought it for her. I think I was like 14, 15 years old. I was like, life's not over. And she looked at me like, girl, life's over. And I was like, oh, I understand her. And what you do is you raise your children to have choice. And sometimes it doesn't work well because for a plethora of reasons. Because you just didn't want your children to be like you, to suffer. And that's the thing. Unfortunately, church has left such a negative imprint on so many Black families, Black women. And this is why we take offense to people like a TD Jakes. And I used to love TD Jakes when I was growing up, but there's some sermons now that he can say, and it's just like, turn off. If you're not going to be promoting the uplifting, the the value of women and their contributions, then I just can't listen to it. The value of us having an education, the value of us trying to thrive, trying to understand ourselves and learn ourselves without these extra restrictions, and I it's turn off. I also want to pause, and I think it's one other component, because I think it's important to realize that a lot of this album was really written, and she dedicated to her uncle, who happens to be gay and died of AIDS. There was a component of this song that is also liberating for the number of Black men, mostly. Not to say that Black women hasn't been affected, because we have, but Black men have been terribly affected about being involved in the church, and has been shunned and ridiculed. And I was raised in a space, my mother has evolved. And I'm going to tell you how my mother's evolved. And I think it's part of how I've evolved as a person, that my mother is in a space where I love you. And I'm in that space where I love you. And if it means that my daughter or my son, there is a mournful period as me as a mom that has to deal with the fact that my child is not going to deal with the vision of who I thought my child would be. But at the end of the day, my love's not going to change. and I'm just going to have to adapt. And that's just how this is. Because I'm not going to lose my son or my daughter. My son and my daughter is not going to be committing suicide. That's my goal, right? I'm not going to get out of touch and not speak to them because because I put religion so far over the love of my child. I'm not doing that. And I'm not going to subject my child to go to listen to sermons that would make them feel worse than when they walk in the door. I will walk out. And my kids are not gay, but I will say that I'm not going to sit and listen to a sermon that reiterates that women are less than. I'm not doing that because my daughter doesn't need to hear that either, and I will walk out of that. So I'm in a very like space of this is not going to work for me. And I can say that from a person I've sat in these sermons where they preached hard against homosexuality to the point that there were some people who absolutely were harmed. I know for a fact that are harmed. And I've actually said this to his wife, that part of in your role of you saying how you have to live this right Christian life and beating people over the head, there are many people whose lives you have harmed. And that is something that I find is difficult to, rethink and recalibrate, because apologies actually kind of need to be made, in my opinion. I'm sure he's not going to do that, but that's not the point. The point is they do need to be made. Now, I want to also reiterate, I went to a Christian school, university, and I will never forget, it was my junior or senior year, and it was a convocation at night. And convocation is it's like chapel. And so you hardly ever have these at night. And I wanted to go to the one at night, and it was in the chapel itself. It doesn't always have to happen in the chapel, but this one was. It was packed. And I knew it was going to be dicey because it was talking about homosexuality in church. And so I came in, sat down, and I listened to about 4 or 5 people explain what it's like, how, and the pastor who happened to be my sociology professor was speaking about how he had to evolve. And everyone was patient, everyone was quiet, everyone was silent until it became everyone's turn to speak. And it became standing up, being so affirmative in their perspective of Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve, quoting Bible verses. This is Sodom and Gomorrah. I mean, it became so eruptive, and to the point that some of the people who were standing up there started turning to each other and holding each other and crying. And I sat there and was just heartbroken. It's something that will never leave my eye, like my vision, because he actually, the pastor, the sociology professor, resigned the next, that at the end of the school year. And I can understand that, because there was going to be no place for him after, I mean, there's going to be no place for him there. I mean, I can't describe to you like how horrific watching it, and I can't imagine what it would feel like to stand in front of a group and have people spew negativity and then have a lot of the crowd agree. They had no friends in that crowd. And that was where my mind began to shift. Like the political side, the science side of me was like, my religious beliefs has nothing to do with their rights. And that's how I began to approach it, even with people at the church, and they were talking about um, gay marriage possibly being legal, and and all that stuff. And I was like, nope, 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 nope. The rights of the individual is different from the rights of dealing with the church. Point blank, period. Constitution. Constitution is different than my moral and my religious beliefs, because my religious beliefs are different than somebody else's religious beliefs, and I do not want their religious beliefs to infringe upon my religious beliefs. And thus, we have to reevaluate this. I was in the minority. I was beginning to deal with this conversation consistently, and I began to be in the minority, and I ended up leaving the church. I ended up leaving that particular church and moving to a different church, and where I'm most happy, where I'm definitely a happier camper. But the point is that I could never, ever, I never want to make anyone feel that way. Point blank, period. And I still have this debate with people to this day when people get upset that I use people's correct pronouns. People still get upset that I will call people by their preferred name, that I accept whatever their identity is. And my thing is, it's a humanity issue. And then number two, how does that make me, how does their identity and sexuality, how does that deal with my salvation? It doesn't. And my salvation is loving people. That's my salvation. Now we can, like I said, and even as a professor, I'm in the classroom and I'm going to disrespect you. Why would I want to take your class? How am I going to learn from someone who openly disrespects me just by saying, I'm not going to call you by your name? Something as simple and to your inner self and being, such as a name. And I can't call you by your name. Like, that is just horrific and basic. And I say all that, and I didn't mean for this video to be this long, which is another component of this. It's another component of this song, Church Girl, is that you should be free with yourself. And gay men had to really suffer. Just thinking about that, I want to, last thing is, I want to emphasize that there was the same pastor who preached so hard against the LGBTQ plus community, then makes a comment when I became an adult, when it wasn't in a preaching setting, it was just hanging out, like hanging out at the house. And he was like, well, it's different when it's two lesbians, two women, and two men. And it's like, oh, so now we're talking about sexuality. Like, so now this is not, because if this is strictly Bible, then it shouldn't matter, right? According to you, if they're boys or girls, it should matter only because they are, right? Isn't that what you've been telling me? And then for you to now say something completely different, it's like, oh, so this is sexual fantasy now. This is like carnal, is what you would call it. Like, and that lessened my level of respect for him even more, and it's unfortunate. And I love this song because it is really hitting home for it's okay to be a part of the church. It is okay to love the Lord. And it's also okay to dance. And it's also okay to understand your sexuality. And it's also okay to be sexual, right? So get in the church, girl, Beyonce, Renaissance.